Welcome to Writer Syndrome. This is a podcast about writing from start to finish. I'm your host, Russ Capasso, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Letney. Tim Letney, how are you?
Doing well, Russ. Thanks for having me, man.
Having you. I mean, you're going to be here every episode.
I know, but like you're inviting me to your space. I appreciate it.
You're always invited. So yeah, what do we do now?
I think that's the question, right? We wanted to discuss where we begin, not as a podcast, but as a writer. Where do you start?
A little background for everyone. We are kind of Tim's been writing for a long time, I would say.
Can we say successfully, though?
So I'm actually in the middle of working on publishing my first novel, which will be coming out this fall, hopefully this year. Tim and I have been supporting each other in our journey for getting our first books published, and that's kind of where this spawned from. So it's kind of lessons from our early road here.
Russ has been integral in like getting me back on track for writing. I'd written for a while, I majored in English, my undergrad, graduate degree in English, but I was completely stuck when it came to creative writing again. And Russ, thank you, inspired me to, get back in the chair and get back to it after a lot of years off. The last time I was in a writer's group was in my late 20s. So now that I'm an old man in my 40s, it's been a while.
Was it late 20s? Is that the same one that I was in with you? Or were we in our early 30s?
No, it was different. Actually, I'd sat down. I was going to write, I was writing a coming of age tale of a cannibal in Boston, Because there was a clarion call for that story to be told. But I had no plan. I pantsed the whole thing and I never finished it. So I got maybe 200 pages in. I look back at it as a learning experience, maybe necessary to where I am now. And full disclosure, now I'm finishing up the third draft of a novel that I hope to publish sometime within the next year. So Russ is much further along than I am. I'm feeling pretty good, honestly. And I can say that I finished a story. I don't know how perfect it is right now, but I finished a story and I'm pretty damn proud of it, honestly.
That's a win right there. So yeah, I think what we want to talk about in this one was, where do we start? Where do we begin? Where did you start? And what do you think of that when we talked about this briefly before we started? It's like, what does that mean?
It's funny. I don't want to go all the way back to when I was a kid, right? But I do think that writing has tendrils, which also appear in my story, tendrils that go all the way back to youth, right? It's like when you feel you're most uninhibited and creative and less judged, and you get praise for writing in a way. So ever since I was a kid, I liked writing. I was into it. And then I kind of followed that trajectory up through college. And then I just stopped, man. I stopped. And then in the back of my head, it was like, I'm going to get back to it someday. Right. And then I started to kind of be like, that was something I did when I was just a kid. I'm done with it.
Yeah.
And I just kept having this question. All right, I want to do it. Where do I start? Started reading about writing, researching about writing, but I wasn't fucking writing.
Yes. Yeah. You could do all the research you want, but if you're not writing, you're not writing. So
yeah, it was weird. It was like, it's like when you're Googling a sickness, it's every ache is cancer. Every thought is writing,
That's why I hated writing when I was younger. I was terrible at it, and I still am, but I'm getting better. So with everything. So
I think that's an interesting, I don't want to call you out, Russ, but I want to call you out. And I know I've done this a little bit in our Zoom meetings. You are not terrible at writing.
Oh, thanks, man.
And one of the ways to get started, honestly, is to not be hard on yourself. And
100%.
Because honestly, the stuff you say about yourself, you believe that shit, right? You'll believe those lies that your brain will say. And all of a sudden it forms this narrative of, I'm not that great. I read your book. I know it's good.
Thanks, man. But it's also I say that, and it's, there's a little self-deprecation there, but it's also the
humbleness.
Yeah. And it's, from my first draft of this book to my third or fourth draft, I'm kind of learning how to tell a story correctly, whatever that means. I can see how much better I've gotten. And I still have so much more road to go to getting better with it. But it's like, wow, okay, I can see progress being made from each draft and each revision. So
that's great.
Recognizing that whatever you write is going to be terrible, but you just have to start. You have to start with something and make it better, right? And I think that's like everyone reads that in every writing book there is, right?
I wasn't prepared for how bad my first draft was. I didn't realize it as I was writing. I'd read, everywhere like, oh, don't share your first draft. Lock it in a closet for 6 months until it festers and then come back to it. And when I came back to it, I was like, oh my God. Like I felt like I was revising a middle schooler. But I mean, that's to say, I think all first drafts for everybody, they're a little messy. And I think it's important to get through it.
Yeah.
The whole thing. Like where I got stuck the first time, and I think we're jumping ahead a little bit, but the first time that I sat down to write a book when I was younger, I got stuck in that endless cycle of revisions. Because I was in a writer's group. So I'd write 10 pages and then I'd edit 10 pages. And it was just this constant 2 steps forward, 10 steps back every single time. And I never finished the damn thing, which is probably for the best because I reread it recently. Oh God. Ooh, so edgy. Look at you. Autobiographical story about a cannibal.
I think, well, it's funny because we were talking about like, you know, the topic is like, where do you start? Where do you get going? But, you know, at the end of that, it's also like finishing is also equally as important, no matter how garbage you feel the thing is that you're doing. Just get it done from start to finish. And
I think we can speak to the process of starting something and getting all the way to the end. So Russ, question for you.
Yeah, hit me.
If you can like think back eons ago to when you sat down to start this book, maybe even before you sat down, what got you in the chair and what helped you get through it? So
this is going to sound a little cheesy, but I got to say my dad, actually. So the basis of this story is an idea he actually was a kind of a rough premise he had, right? We were emailing back and forth because I wanted to write something. And originally this was going to be like a screenplay, which, you know, I enjoy that format of writing, but the novel I definitely had more control over. So that's kind of where it started. And we were emailing back and forth about it. And then he kind of fleshed out the premise a little bit more. And I took it and I was like, well, there's not really a story here. I need to figure that out. So, but honestly, he was kind of a big motivation because then all of a sudden he was just sending me like research and links to like all these articles related to the topic. And it kind of just kept building. It was like every week, every other day, he would send me something. So I was like, okay, I got to get this thing going. And then, I mean, I started it at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. What else also helped was I got fired from my job and wanted to write a novel, and then there was a pandemic. So what are you going to do? Sit inside for 3 months and write a book.
Had you been thinking about writing a novel like when you were still employed? You know, it was that kind of in the back of your head.
Yeah, I had a goal of mine was to like take time off. I was like trying to get there, take time off to focus on it because I have a hard time. Like, I know you've done a really amazing job of like balancing, you know, work and life and family and also writing, which is a big topic we could talk about in a whole other episode. But like I some of those things, I don't have some of those responsibilities. So,
I mean, the pandemic gave me headspace and space. Yeah. I mean, this work from home has provided, I mean, I'm essentially using commute time to write before I actually log into work. Yeah. And in the evenings too, you know, I'm home as soon as the day's over. I don't need to commute home. So I've been able to use that time. I'm going to sound cheesy to echo your sentiment. That's beautiful that your dad helped you kind of move the needle along with this story and that it helped strengthen a bond. Because I think writing in general, right? I mean, obviously it's all about communication. You're developing this relationship with your dad that maybe you wouldn't have had, probably strengthening it through art, through your writing. That's cool. Yeah, I'm guessing that comes through in the book, honestly.
Well, it's funny because he came up with the idea, the premise, but there really wasn't like a story per se, right? Like he had all these ideas and like he would feed me like some dialogue ideas and some stuff I would keep, some scenes and everything like that, which was, you know, helpful, motivating, but like there wasn't a meat to the story. And I was finally like going through some of his emails and I was like, wait a second, I should just kind of have like this, you know, father-son type of story attached to it. And I was like, this is kind of a no-brainer. It's right in front of me. And then that kind of gave it like a little more heart, which I'm still working on making that kind of come through. But
so you had the kickoff, you know, you've got the initiation kind of from your pop. Yeah. Did you set yourself a daily schedule, like a certain amount of time, the word limit, or was there some legwork that had to be done even before that on the research end of things? Or
so this is gonna be fun because we've been talking about writing for a while now, and we definitely have two different approaches, and mine is very like structured.
We should probably tell the audience that we've been chatting about writing every week on Zoom for months and months.
Are we almost to a year, maybe?
I mean, it's probably like the seed of this podcast was. We've been doing this organically anyway.
But I think so for me, before even sitting down, it was just like I need some structure. I need to see all the beats. Of course, my ending was like I thought it was good, and it's terrible. I'm still dealing with problems with it, but I had to have like scene by scene kind of breakdown, so I knew where I was going, and stuff shifted, and that's totally fine, right? But there was definitely this kind of prep work of like, okay, cool, I get the premise, I've got some of these major scenes, these major beats that are going to happen, I can outline those, and then the actual writing itself was, I set myself a goal of like 2,000 a day. And that's what I wanted to get to. And that was, I remember that first like month, it was the first week, it was like, I could do 200. And I was just like, I'm spent. I can't write any, like I couldn't figure it out. And then it was like next week, it was like all of a sudden up to 500. And then the week after I was like, up to 750. And then it's like, I'm up to 1,000. And I quickly jumped to like 2,000. And then some days I was doing like 3,000 to 4,000 in a day. And then the next day I would do like 1,000 or something. So it's so momentum based. And once you get going, it was just like, yeah, I knocked out a first draft in 2.5 months, I think. So
great. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because I think I've had a really similar experience. It reminds me a lot of really any kind of exercise. Your body doesn't want to do it, but you need to go to a space to do it. Your muscles are weak. I mean, if you're looking at your brain at the time, you're not used to writing, so you're going to start low. But the more you come back to the bench, the more you sit down at the table and type, the stronger you get, the easier the words come. So if I had any bit of advice for anybody listening right now, it'd be, don't be discouraged if you sit down and you write 15 words.
Yeah, that's something.
Just like don't be discouraged if you're going to sit down and lift 5 pounds the first time, because every time you come back to it, you'll be able to do more. But it's that routine.
Yep.
And it's the hardest time, I think, to carve out. And I think you need not just mental space, you actually need a physical space that you can go to, whether it's a desk in the corner, a basement, a library, someplace that you can give yourself an hour or two, even if nothing happens, where you can just focus. When I had started writing this piece, it was a little bit before the pandemic, and I didn't plan like you. I was pantsing at that moment. I started to plot later, but when I first started writing, it was just a feeling. I was like listening to the Dead Boys. I was like, and I was at the gym actually, and I was like, oh man, this feels like punk 70s, cold winter. And I was like, oh, I'd love to write an apocalyptic tale or something about, the late 70s, maybe in New York City, maybe Boston. And I went home at night after work, with like 2 kids after dinner, trying to write. I didn't have a space. I'm in like an 800 square foot house in Somerville, Massachusetts. I was standing at like the mantle, just trying to type, trying to get in that headspace where you can like imagine and get into that kind of like spell casting where like you're picturing where you are, and you can't do that with a dog barking and kids yelling and the door opening and closing. You really need to find a space and find the time.
I don't know how you did it.
Well, that's the thing, is that I failed that time. I didn't succeed until I moved down here to New Jersey. Like where I actually have a writer's desk. We have a little more space. I don't think I would have succeeded if I kept with that approach, because I was writing like I was drinking, It was a binge. I was binge writing. I wasn't writing to share information. I think it was like writing to emotionally let off steam or give myself purpose. The funny thing is, the more that I've found writing or time to write here, the less I've been drinking, because damn it, I think I feel sated. It's not like this emotional thing anymore. It's more story plot driven. I mean, I won't say it's not emotional, but it's not driven by frustration, I think is what I mean to say, which is the same thing that all of my vices are driven by. And I don't want writing to be a vice. It's very much a release.
And on the flip side, like I have none of those things distract me, but you still, even without that life distractions around you, pull you in kind of different ways, like having a space you can go to, like even here,
And you do have distractions. I mean, you could be in your house completely alone, and like refrigerator, TV, Tinder,
the old PlayStation, the old dating apps and the PlayStation, right?
Everything's a distraction. I mean, honestly, sitting down at a computer, right? Like you want to sit down to write, and all of a sudden you're in a web browser. And that's really interesting, right? Because I've used the web for research, but early on it turned into surfing. And all of a sudden I'm just kind of dicking off on the internet. And
have you ever done like on completely like offline mode and just had like just your writing app open?
So you want to talk about work-life balance? The only time that I have offline mode is I have an hour and a half every Thursday at my kids' gymnastics, where I bring my computer and there's no Wi-Fi, and I write in Scrivener offline. But that's the only time. But it's so weird, right? Because there's all these parents in there like, go Sally, do your cartwheel. And I'm like writing this really gory, horror novel. But it really did take some time for me to sit down. The first book that I had read to kind of get there was Julia Cameron's Artist Way. And it wasn't bad. It's not me. I mean, it didn't hit with me. I appreciate some of the ethos of that book, but it wasn't helpful for me.
Yeah.
There was a lot of cataloging and a lot of identifying the people who support you and the people who don't support you.
Yeah.
And I think it's valuable, honestly, to do a little cataloging to make sure when you share this new part of your life or a part of your life that you're returning to, that in the beginning, you only share it with people who you think are going to be supportive of you and not try to knock you down, because you're going to be a fragile little flower for a little while. Yeah. About what it means. And, always there's some kind of ego or airs that you're putting on by being a writer, when in truth, I think everybody's a writer, and it's a really valuable art. But anyway, that book wasn't wildly inspirational to me. Yeah. It had its pieces, but one that actually helped me a ton was Stephen King's On Writing.
I could second that too. That was probably one of the first books like early on I read.
There was no pretension. Yeah. And it was the one to me that got, honestly, and the parts that are about writing, all the stuff about King's life is, really interesting. Yeah. But the pieces on writing, there's probably 50 or 60 pages. It's really, really short. Yeah. But just hammering home the importance of finishing and just barreling through your first draft, just getting through the damn thing helped me so much. Because no matter what, at the end of that draft, you wrote a book. And now you got a big lump of clay. Yeah, you got to go back. You got to, smooth it out. You got to add some details. You got to fix some plot points. Yeah. But it's way easier to do that, at least for me, than it was to edit as I was going. Yeah. So I would really recommend reading that book. And just to reiterate, King's point, finish. Don't edit as you write. Just get through the damn thing. Yeah. And edit later. You'll have plenty of time to make it pretty. Yep. And don't share it with anybody. Yeah. Not even your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner,
your dog,
your therapist.
No one. Nobody. Just let it sit and then come back to it.
Because anything can derail you. I will say that I think writers by nature, I don't want to speak for all writing kind. I can speak for myself. I'm sensitive. Yeah. I think writers can be sensitive. I think it's what makes good writing good. Yeah. It's that empathy, that emotion, being able to tie into the human plight. Yeah, yeah. But because of that, we're a little fragile too. And obviously, everybody wants to be praised. I think writers want to be read. And of course, we want our works to be liked. Yeah. Even before they're published, I think we're just in a really fragile state that if you go for that approval early on, you're not going to like what you get, because you're not putting your best foot forward until you edit it a few times.
I was just thinking this was the first big thing I've shared that I've shared with more than 2 or 3 people. I definitely had a light bulb moment of there was this big fear of I've done this thing and I'm handing it off to someone to read. And I know I handed off to, you read the second or third draft, but a friend of mine read it, and another friend of mine, and he was really brutally honest with his feedback on it. But at that point, I just I took out all of my emotional connection to it and was just okay, how do I make this thing better now? It's tough. And it was brutal. And I was like, oh man, can I do this? And then when I reread it, I was like, okay, this is garbage. And then you just keep reading. And then going back. And like I said, after that second draft, I was like, oh, this is getting better. Then it's okay, I know how to take feedback now and use it constructively and don't take it as an attack, on my, personal skills. Cause I know I can get better at it and I know I need to get better at it. So I think you got my questionnaire when I sent out to beta readers, and one of the first kind of rules of reading and giving me feedback was I didn't want people to be nice. I was don't be nice, be honest, because being nice doesn't help me make this better. You have to tell me what's wrong with it, and once you get to that point, it completely changes the game. Actually, other people who read it were more concerned about hurting my feelings. And I was like, no. No. You have no idea how much you're helping me right now by calling out nitpicky stuff.
And as much as I would say to not share your early work, one thing that I have found helpful, since everything I think is about story, not just the stories we're telling on the screen or in print, but the stories we kind of tell about ourselves. One thing that's helped me a lot is talking about writing. I'll share with dads at pickup. They're oh, how's your day going? It's pretty good. I was editing today and, XYZ, or, I'm working on, this chapter, because the more I talk about it, it doesn't feel like a dirty secret anymore. Obviously, I'm not trying to brag I'm writing a book. Yeah. But it's the most important thing next to my kids in my life right now. So I want to talk about it. And at first I was a little nervous about bringing it up. It was this hidden thing. This like, it's not pornography, you're sliding under your bed. Do kids still do that?
I don't know.
They slide their iPads under their bed. But talking about it helped me because I became more comfortable with the idea of defining myself as a writer.
Yeah.
I won't say author until I'm published, but I can say writer.
Yeah, agree. I had a similar kind of, I still do. I sometimes I don't like talking, but I love talking about it. Like I'm excited about it and I'm like really passionate about it and I enjoy talking about it, like hearing from people what they have to say. But I know early on I was like terrified to tell people what I was like doing and working on. And I don't know, it's definitely another thing to get over, because once you start talking it through, it also kind of validates that, oh yeah, I've written something. I am a writer. This is what I've done. So we're talking about where to start, where to begin, and how to kind of get that going. I think another part of that process too is what are we reading right now? What are you watching, and what are you kind of consuming while you're getting going? So I don't know. What have you been reading or watching lately?
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo that. I feel like you can't write, or at least you can't write well unless you're reading. And I'm not saying you got to read every minute of the day. Obviously, like we're on Reddit, you're reading email, you're reading the paper. But I think if you're writing fiction, you need to be reading fiction. To write well, you need to read. You don't need to read every second of the day. But I think picking out something in genre or out of genre is super important. I think movies work too. Hell, man, I'll tell you what, when I was sitting down working on this, you know what helped me, oddly enough? Final Fantasy VII.
Nice.
Right? So I was sitting down, I was like, you know what?
Epic
a lot
saga.
of my characters right now are spinning off on side quests.
Yeah.
Like the party's changing, people are trading. And then I started seeing these references in Final Fantasy all the way back to Star Wars. So like Final Fantasy at its impetus was influenced by Star Wars, which is obviously, influenced by Arthurian legend. And, so yeah, Final Fantasy was helpful to me, as were a bunch of in-genre books that I was reading at the time and still am right now. Actually, I'm reading. Yeah. So right now I'm reading The Troop by Nick Cutter, which is in genre. It's a horror novel. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so good. I've read a bunch of like horror and in-genre stuff just to see, for competitive analysis, to see where I fit and where my style fits.
Yeah.
And I haven't found anything that I wanted to like, that really struck me as one, like great. Yeah. And I think The Troop, which came out in 2014, is just an impressive bit of fiction.
Yeah.
And honestly, the other thing that stuck out to me is obviously Zone 1 by Colson Whitehead. It's like this interesting mix of literary fiction and genre fiction. And, on my best day, I don't think I can get to that level, but Jesus, it's inspiring. It's wonderfully written. Yeah. So, I mean, I totally recommend The Troop if you're into horror, and Zone 1 if you're into horror. Yeah. And super inspirational.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't read any books that were related to my genre as I was writing this. I think I read like The Stand and a bunch of sci-fi novels. But I think it was good. It was good to kind of like step outside of that, because I did read one, because my book's like a kind of a techno thriller, espionage type of thing, and I read one, and I was just like, oh man, this is pretty boring. I'm not gonna say what it was, but I was like, this is pretty boring. I don't like it. I was like, oh no, what have I done? Oh no, is mine boring? So I was like, let's focus on not making it boring like this.
Yeah, last summer I had a bit of a crisis, because I was like, okay, I'm writing a horror book, and this is like not great to say, but I don't read horror books. Like I read like, I counted myself literary fiction. In fact, one of the reasons why I think I didn't write for so long was because I was waiting for the great literary fiction idea to come. I was going to write something great, but when I sit down to write, all of a sudden it's all, zombies and, slashers and all that. It's like the 1980s horror movies that I was influenced by. So I didn't really know what was happening in the horror genre. Obviously I've read like a staggering amount of King, but other than King, I didn't know. So I kind of took it as my homework to go to the library. We've got a great one here, and just get as many books in genre out as I could, just to see where I was falling, because I'd started writing honestly without knowing the landscape at all. And I think you kind of need to know the landscape.
You did. I agree.
For writing, but also later on for comps, what is this like? Yeah.
Which I'm having a hard time. Because originally I pictured this as a screenplay. So in my head, I was using movies to like kind of compare it to.
I started mine as a screenplay.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about where we started there.
Yeah. So it's like in movies, like we're both, massive movie fans. So it's like, that's where my brain goes. Like my brain goes towards movies because that's what I know. I honestly,
I know
like,
why I transitioned away from a script.
Yeah.
Why did you transition away from a script?
Going this route, I knew I could control every aspect of it, and I could publish it and have it out there, and I could mostly powered by myself. Obviously, you need a lot of people to do this process, but like a screenplay, I was like, yeah, cool, I could write one, but what are the chances? That feels like such a chasm to leap over, to like produce something and get it out there and say like, I've got this thing. In a novel, it was like I can with self-publishing everything, which is the route I'm going to go. It's like I have so much more control over this, and I can do it, and it's kind of control my own fate there, instead of hoping that some script reader somewhere comes across it.
Yeah, similar for me. It was honestly the agency, and you don't need to rely on too many other people. So I was sitting down to write the script, and you can picture it in your head, but you're not supposed to add a bunch of detail, or and they're supposed to be kind of bare bones by nature. And I was like, wow, I got to rely on so many people that when the script is done, the script's done, but my quote unquote vision will be
goes through so many hands.
Yeah, so many hands. And honestly, if we're speaking honestly, it would have gone through none. Yeah, I just would have finished the script and I would have kicked it out. And if I didn't have our wonderful friends who are filmmakers assist, they just would have sat in a drawer. Mm-hmm. So I know that when I finish this, it's complete, and it's complete on my own terms.
And you can get it out there, like you can push that too. So that's I think.
Yeah, we can talk about that in a future episode. Publishing versus self-publishing, and
yeah, definitely. I think that was good stuff. So we're going to wrap it up there, I think. So that's our episode. Thanks for listening. Join us next time. We'll discuss a fun, interesting topic for us. Tim and I both have lead female characters in our books, and we've discussed this quite a bit. And it's like men writing female characters. So
yeah, men writing women. Oh,
yeah, it's a tough one. But in the meantime, you should head over to our website, writersyndrome.com, for more information. We'll have a bunch of stuff coming up there. You can follow us on Twitter. We are writer_syndrome. Until next time, keep writing.